War. When it comes to war, people only think about victory or how strong an army is. But one thing which people do not see is what happens to the civilians. In World War II, shockingly, an estimate of 85 million people died, which was 3% of the global population in 1940. In today's video, we will be zooming into the country of Japan, more specifically the town of Hiroshima, in which was affected by World War II and had one of the biggest bomb explosions in the history. In this incident, an American B-29 plane dropped a uranium bomb called Little Boy on Hiroshima. And the book that I'll be talking about in today's video would be about a person who survived the bomb. So firstly, before we talk about the author, the name of today's book is called The Complete Story of Sadako Sasaki. Don't be fooled by the thickness of the book. Even though it's really small, there's so many things you can learn from Sadako. Now, the author of the book is called Sue DeSico. Sue DeSico is an American sculptor, children's book author, illustrator, as well as the founder of the Arm with the Arts and Peace Crane project. Sue DeSico wanted to find out more and the full story of Sadako Sasaki, so she went to meet up with Masahiro Sasaki, who is the older brother of Sadako, who lived during the war and still currently is present. So Masahiro Sasaki helped in the writing of this story of the life of Sadako, who was really inspiring and might have just helped the world regain its peace after World War II. This story is about a survivor from the atomic bomb. Her name's Sadako Sasaki. Sadako Sasaki was born in Hiroshima in 7th January 1943, and surprisingly, she was born in a pedicab, also called a rickshaw, which was one of the modes of transports in Japan in the 19s. So life seemed happy for Sadako and her family until Sadako's father, Shigeo, had to serve the army because the war escalated in World War II. So when the war escalated and Shigeo, Sadako's father, had to serve the army, he was away from the family most of the times and was never at home. So the people left to take care of Sadako and Masahiro, which is Sadako's brother, was Sadako's grandmother and Sadako's mother, who was also taking care of them. So, for a routine, on a daily basis, Sadako always had to follow the strict rules of going to shelter because almost every day, air raids would take place in Hiroshima and other parts of Japan. So, one fine day, there was a different turn of events. 2 planes came. Coincidentally, many people thought it was an accident that one plane came and left, but it wasn't the case. The first plane which came was to check on the temperature and the conditions of the sky in Hiroshima. And a second plane was a newly modified B-29 US plane, which dropped something shiny in the sky. And a lot of people looked up and admired the shiny thing. But it was too late. It was an atomic bomb which exploded 600 meters above the ground level. When the bomb exploded, Sadako and her family were thrown aback, and her family were trapped in the debris. So Sadako and her mother tried to rescue her grandmother and Masahiro, her brother, and they successfully did. Ground temperatures reached around 3,500 degrees, and many people burned to death, or the people who survived were caught under the debris and were injured and could not move to safety. Sadako's mother knew that the only way to survive was to get to the river. So all of them went to the river, but the grandmother of Sadako remembered that she forgot to retrieve the ihai, which was a tablet which is made for people who passed away in a family, which was in this case made for Sadako's grandfather. But on the way, and when she retrieved it, she did not come back alive. But Sadako and her mother and Masahiro, the brother, made it back safely. But they lived another 5 to 6 years after the atomic bomb healthily. And she was one of the most fastest people in her school, and she wanted to continue her dream of being in the school team and even going up for Olympics. But this dream never came true. Sadako wanted to continue her journey to become in the running school team, but her dream never came true because she was hospitalized. When her parents found out that Sadako had leukemia, which is a blood type cancer also caused by the atomic bomb, also known by Hiroshima people commonly as the atomic bomb disease, in which many people, even though they survived the bomb, suffered from its after effects. So when Sadako was hospitalized, she spent a couple of days alone and being lonely, until in 1955 she moved into another room with a roommate called Kyu, who was a high school girl a couple of years older than her. One day when Kyu's friend brought paper cranes, Sadako asked her father, who was sitting beside her, Shijio, what the paper cranes signified. Sadako's father told Sadako that the paper cranes signified that for a folder who folds 1,000 paper cranes, one paper crane for each of a crane's life, the folder's wish is granted. So when Sadako knew this, she was so persistent and wanted to get to a goal of 1,000 paper cranes. She, with her friends from the hospital, helped to gather scraps of paper from medicine wrapping, paper from her schoolmates, and also just unwanted pieces of paper to get to her goal. So, while she was folding, her persistence spread to the whole of the hospital, and everyone helped her fold the paper cranes so that her wish could be granted. Now, one question that I have to ask you is that if you have a chance to fold 1,000 paper cranes in a life or death situation, would you choose either between these two wishes? To save your life or pull out your family from a debt? Many of you may choose saving your life. Even I might, because it's between a life or death situation. But this is the moment, one of the key moments, where Sadako showed her generosity. Even though she was going through so much pain, she chose to get her family out of debt. And one fine day, when Sadako told her mother and whispered to her about the secret, about the true reason why she was folding the paper cranes and her wish, Sadako whispered to her mother not to tell her father so that Sadako's father, Shijio, would not be worried too much. And going on in the story, many books that were published about Sadako stated about a lot of her not reaching her goal, or some books talking about her reaching her goal. But the true one is by Masahiro Sasaki, who was a brother who told us in this book that Sadako exceeded her goal. And when she exceeded her goal and finally got off that huge feeling of stress of her, that she finally folded 1,000 and knew that her wish was going to be granted, she passed away one day, happily. And this paper crane folding, till this day, is an iconic thing done by many people around the world, not just in Japan, but around the whole world, as a memorial of peace. There are so many things you can learn from Sadako in this book, but particularly I learned two key messages from Sadako. Firstly, I learned from Sadako that if you would like to achieve something, you gotta strive and work hard towards it. Especially when Sadako wanted to reach her goal of 1,000 paper cranes, she persisted even though she was struggling to cope with staying alive and she had so much pain, but despite the pain, she pulled through and reached her goal. The second thing that Sadako showed is that one phrase in Japanese culture, which in page 35 of this book is this phrase, omoiyari-no-kokoro, which means it's a saying that is about how an act of people showing empathy and concern towards others despite having problems themselves, in which Sadako showed during her last final months to her family, though she had problems herself, she still cared for others rather than caring for herself the most. The next thing I would like to talk about is not about Sadako, but it's about how this book and Sadako also a bit of taught to us how peace can be achieved. So one quote, especially from the last part of the book, the back page, is by Dr. David Krieger, president of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. This book was written to inform young readers of Sadako's struggle and to inspire them to take action for peace. So as us young readers, we found out from this book that Sadako, just by folding 1,000 paper cranes, which is a small thing, brought peace to the world, and the paper cranes is now one of the most iconic symbols of peace in the whole world. And this is one of the best quote that I believe from here strongly in. And the last thing that I would like to say is about war. When it comes to war, no one wins. It brings out the worst in people and ends a lot of people's lives on a large scale. And it doesn't bring any benefit to both sides of the war because everyone has to struggle and get back to the top. Before COVID-19 struck the world, I was lucky enough to visit Hiroshima myself last year during December. And when I visited there, I got to experience for myself how life felt like after the atomic bomb. I visited many places in Hiroshima which relate about the atomic bomb, such as the place where the bomb was exactly dropped on, and the most popular site, which was the museum, which held many remains of the bodies of people who died in the atomic bomb, and with a short description about how significant they were and what this meant about the certain remains, like a pouch or bag from the person's remains. And I bought this book personally from the museum, and this book is not only sold in Japan, it is also sold worldwide, also in Amazon, and I'll leave all the links in the description below if you would like to get the book for yourself and read it. Also, I really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe, because this video is really special and it was really hard to make because I had to gather my knowledge from my life experience in Hiroshima and as well as the book to make this video, and I really appreciate it. And lastly, I really urge world leaders to not use atomic bombs ever again and not let history repeat itself, because as a young millennial going into a new era, I would never want to see such a tragedy happen again. See you next week.